Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to introduce today's presentation on separation of substances. This is the first slide, and it sets the stage for what we're going to explore together. We'll be covering the different methods used to separate substances, why separation is important, and how these techniques apply in real-world situations. So, let's get started and dive into this fascinating topic. Let's take a look at the contents of this presentation. Here, we see several methods of separation, each with its own unique application. For example, instances of separation include techniques like hand-picking, which is simple but effective for sorting large, visible items. Moving on, we have processes like sieving, which is used to separate larger particles from smaller ones, often with a mesh or sieve. Hand-picking is straightforward and useful when the particles are easily distinguishable by eye. Thrashing and winnowing are traditional methods used in agriculture to separate grains from chaff or husks. Decantation and sedimentation involve letting heavier particles settle out of a liquid, making it easier to pour off the clearer liquid. Evaporation and condensation are physical processes that help in separating components based on their boiling points. Evaporation turns a liquid into vapor, while condensation cools vapor back into liquid. Filtration is another key method, especially for removing solid impurities from liquids or gases. All these methods collectively help us understand how to separate mixtures effectively, which ties into the overall theme of understanding different techniques to isolate specific components. Each method plays a vital role, depending on the nature of the materials involved. Now, let's look at some common instances of separation that we encounter in everyday life. For example, when we prepare tea, we often use a strainer to separate the tea leaves from the liquid. This is a simple but effective way to ensure that only the flavorful liquid makes it into our cup, leaving behind the leaves. The key idea here is that separation helps us isolate specific components from a mixture, making it easier to use or consume. Throughout this presentation, we'll explore various methods of separation and see how they are applied in different contexts to solve real-world problems. Now, let's talk about hand-picking, which is actually one of the simplest methods we use to separate substances. It's especially useful when the unwanted material is in a small quantity, making manual removal practical and efficient. The key idea here is that the unwanted material often differs from the useful material in shape, size, or color. This difference allows us to easily pick out the unwanted items by hand. For example, when we're cleaning rice or wheat, we might find small pebbles, broken grains, or even insects mixed in. Using hand picking, we can carefully remove these impurities without any complicated machinery. It's a straightforward process, but it relies heavily on our observation and careful selection. This method highlights how simple techniques can be very effective, especially when the differences between materials are noticeable. It also connects to the overall theme of efficient separation methods, where understanding the properties of the substances involved helps us choose the right approach. Now, let's talk about thrashing. Thrashing is a crucial step in the harvesting process. It refers to the method we use to separate the seeds from the harvested stalks. Essentially, after the crops are collected, the seeds are still attached to the stalks, and thrashing is what frees them. This step is vital because it directly impacts the quality and quantity of the seeds we can collect for planting or sale. Throughout this presentation, you'll see that thrashing connects to the overall theme of efficient farming practices and maximizing crop yield. It's a traditional yet essential process that has evolved over time, but remains at the heart of grain processing. Now, let's talk about the different methods of thrashing. When the quantity of harvested crop is small, thrashing is usually done manually. This means taking small bundles of stalks and thrashing them on a hard surface to help separate the grains from the stalks. It's a simple yet effective method for small-scale farming. As the quantity increases, farmers often rely on traditional animal-powered methods. In this method, the stalks are spread around a pole, and several bullocks are tied to it. When these animals walk over the stalks, their hooves trample the plants, which helps in loosening and separating the grains. It's a labor-intensive process but works well for larger harvests. Today, however, most farmers use thrashing machines. These machines are much more efficient and save a lot of time and effort. They can be powered by either a diesel engine or an electric motor, making the process quicker and less labor-intensive. This evolution from manual to machine thrashing highlights how technology has improved agricultural productivity and efficiency, fitting into the broader theme of modern advancements in farming. Let's talk about winnowing. Winnowing is an ancient agricultural method that was developed by early cultures to separate grain from chaff. It's a simple yet effective technique that helps farmers get rid of the unwanted husks and debris. Additionally, winnowing is also used to remove pests like weevils from stored grain, helping to protect the harvest. This process highlights how early humans relied on natural methods for food preservation and safety, which connects to our overall theme of ingenuity in agricultural practices. It's fascinating to see how such a basic technique played a crucial role in food security for ancient societies. Now, let's take a closer look at the process of thrashing. Thrashing is the crucial step where we loosen the grain or seeds from their husks and straw. Think of it as the step that prepares the harvest for the next phase. It's important to note that thrashing happens before winnowing, which is the process of separating the chaff from the grains. By effectively thrashing, we ensure that the grains are freed from the plant material, making the subsequent winnowing more efficient. This step is fundamental in the overall process of preparing grains for storage or sale. It highlights how each stage builds on the previous one to achieve a clean, usable product. Let's talk about sieving, which is a key process in material analysis. A sieve, or sifter, is essentially a device used to separate wanted elements from unwanted material. It's also useful for characterizing the particle size distribution within a sample. Typically, this is done using a woven screen, like a mesh or a net, or sometimes metal. The main idea is to pass the material through the sieve to sort or analyze the particles based on size. This process helps us understand the texture and quality of our sample, which is crucial in many applications. Overall, sieving is a fundamental step in ensuring the consistency and quality of materials in various industries. Let's talk about the word sift and where it comes from. It actually derives from the word sieve. In the kitchen, a sifter is a handy tool used to break up clumps in dry ingredients like flour, making sure everything is nice and smooth. It also helps aerate the flour, which is important for achieving the right texture in baking. Additionally, a sifter can be used to combine ingredients evenly. Now, a similar tool is a strainer. Think of it as a type of sieve, but it's mainly used to separate solids from liquids, like draining pasta or rinsing vegetables. Connecting this to our overall theme, understanding the origin and function of these tools helps us appreciate their role in both cooking and language. How the simple act of sifting can be a metaphor for separating or refining things in many contexts. All right, let's talk about evaporation. Evaporation is a specific type of vaporization, which means it's how a liquid turns into a gas. But what's unique about evaporation is that it happens only from the surface of the liquid. Imagine a drop of water gradually disappearing from a puddle. That's evaporation in action. What's important to understand here is that it occurs into a gaseous phase that isn't saturated with the vapor of the liquid. In other words, the air around the liquid isn't full of vapor already. It has room to take in more. This is why evaporation can happen even at temperatures below the boiling point. This process is fundamental to many natural phenomena, like how water from lakes and oceans evaporates into the atmosphere, contributing to weather patterns and the water cycle. So, in the context of our overall theme, understanding evaporation helps us grasp how liquids transition into gases under different conditions, which is key to many environmental and industrial processes. Let's take a moment to compare vaporization types. The other main type is boiling, which is quite distinct from evaporation. When boiling occurs, bubbles of saturated vapor form within the liquid itself. These bubbles rise to the surface and release vapor into the air. What's important to remember here is that boiling happens throughout the entire liquid, not just at the surface. It usually occurs at a specific temperature called the boiling point. This process is a key part of understanding how liquids change into gases under different conditions. which ties back to our overall theme of phase changes and energy transfer. Let's talk about condensation. Condensation is essentially the process where a substance changes from a gas into a liquid. Think about water vapor turning back into liquid water on a cold mirror. That's a perfect example. It's important to remember that condensation is actually the reverse of evaporation. While evaporation involves a liquid turning into gas and rising into the air, condensation happens when that gas cools down and transforms back into a liquid. This process plays a key role in many natural and industrial systems, from cloud formation in the atmosphere to the functioning of refrigeration. Understanding condensation helps us grasp how water cycles through the environment and how humidity and temperature influence weather patterns. So, in summary, condensation is a fundamental phase change in the cycle of matter, connecting the states of gas and liquid, and it's crucial for both understanding natural phenomena and managing various technological processes. Let's talk about the water cycle. When most people hear that term, they think of the movement of water through different stages in nature. But technically, the water cycle also includes a specific process where water vapor changes back into liquid water. This happens when the vapor comes into contact with a surface, like a leaf, the ground, or even tiny particles in the air called cloud condensation nuclei. This process is crucial because it leads to cloud formation and ultimately precipitation, which keeps the cycle going. So, understanding this phase helps us see how water constantly moves and transforms in our environment, connecting to the bigger picture of how Earth's climate and ecosystems stay in balance. Let's talk about sedimentation. Essentially, sedimentation is the process where particles that are suspended in a fluid tend to settle out over time. Imagine tiny particles floating in water or another liquid. They don't stay suspended forever. Instead, due to gravity, they gradually move downward and come to rest against a barrier or the bottom of the container. This natural tendency is important in many natural and industrial processes. Understanding sedimentation helps us control or utilize it, whether we're clarifying water, designing filtration systems, or studying geological formations. So, in essence, sedimentation is about particles settling out of suspension and forming a layer at the bottom, which is a key concept in fluid mechanics and separation techniques. Now, let's take a closer look at the forces acting on particles as they move through a fluid. Essentially, their motion is influenced by various forces, and these forces determine how particles behave within the fluid. The main forces to consider are gravity, centrifugal acceleration, and electromagnetism. Each of these plays a significant role depending on the specific context. Gravity, of course, pulls particles downward, affecting their settling velocity. Centrifugal acceleration comes into play when particles are in a rotating system, pushing them outward and impacting their distribution. Electromagnetic forces are particularly important when dealing with charged particles or magnetic fields, influencing their movement in complex ways. Understanding these forces helps us grasp how particles respond under different conditions, which is crucial for predicting their behavior in various applications. Ultimately, all of these forces work through the particles' motion in response to the fluid environment, shaping phenomena we observe in natural and engineered systems alike. Decantation is a useful technique we often use in laboratories and everyday life to separate mixtures. Essentially, it involves carefully pouring off a liquid layer, usually after a solid or precipitate has settled at the bottom. The key idea here is that once the heavier particles have settled, we can remove the clearer liquid without disturbing the sediment below. This process helps us isolate the liquid from the solid or other immiscible liquids. It's especially important because it's simple, cost-effective, and efficient for separating mixtures where the components have different densities. So, in the context of our overall theme of separation techniques, decantation stands out as a straightforward method to achieve a clean separation when the precipitate has already settled, making the process easier and more effective. Let's talk about the purpose behind the decanting process. The main goal here can be twofold. First, we might want to produce a clean decant, which means separating the liquid from the solid or other layers to obtain a purer sample. Alternatively, the purpose could be to remove any undesired liquid that's present in the precipitate or other layers. Understanding this helps us determine the best approach to decanting, ensuring we achieve our desired outcome efficiently. So, whether we're aiming for clarity or purification, the purpose guides how we handle the process. Now let's talk about filtration. Filtration is essentially a process that helps us separate solids from fluids, whether those fluids are liquids or gases. It can involve different methods, mechanical, physical, or even biological operations. The core idea is that we introduce a medium, like a filter, through which only the fluid can pass. So the solids are retained and the clean fluid moves through. This concept is crucial in many industries, from water treatment to air purification, because it allows us to effectively isolate and remove unwanted particles. Overall, filtration is a key technique that ties into our broader theme of separating and purifying substances to ensure safety, efficiency, and quality in various processes. All right, let's talk about filtrate. The fluid that passes through the filter is called the filtrate. Essentially, when blood flows through the kidneys, the filtering units allow water and small molecules to pass through, while larger molecules and blood cells stay behind. This filtered fluid, which is now free of larger components, is what we refer to as the filtrate. Understanding this process is key because it highlights how the kidneys selectively filter blood to maintain proper body balance and remove waste. So, in summary, the filtrate is the fluid that results from this filtration process. It's the first step toward forming urine and keeping our body's internal environment stable. Applications are actually quite diverse and show how fundamental these processes are. For example, in animals, including humans, renal filtration is crucial. It removes wastes from the blood, helping maintain the body's internal balance. This natural filtration system is a perfect illustration of biological filtration in action. Similarly, in water and sewage treatment, we rely on biological films that grow on or within filter media to remove undesirable substances. One common method is slow sand filtration, where a biological layer develops on top of the sand and actively filters out contaminants. These examples highlight how filtration isn't just a biological process, but also a vital engineering tool. It underscores the importance of understanding filtration mechanisms for both health and environmental management. Overall, these applications demonstrate the practical significance of filtration across different systems, connecting back to the overall theme of how essential filtration processes are in maintaining life and environmental quality. Thank you.